mud felt cold against Sarah Mill's face. Soldiers circled, laughing. Sergeant Davis stomped on her rifle. "You're 35 and still chasing war games? Go back to baking cookies." Blood dripped from her cheek. Her name tag hit the mud. The crowd roared. Sarah didn't move, but her fingers curled slightly, just enough to nudge a stone. Beneath her collar, a faded insignia shimmered briefly. They didn't know who she really was. What would you have done in her place? Would you fight back or stay silent? Let us know in the comments below. And if you think dignity matters more than revenge, hit that like button. Fort Benning sprawled across the Georgia landscape like a small city of dust and determination. Among the thousands of soldiers training there, Sarah Mills stood out by trying not to stand out at all. While other recruits boasted about their civilian achievements or military aspirations, she cleaned her weapon in silence. Her blonde hair, always pulled back in a regulation bun, framed a face untouched by makeup. Those blue eyes seemed perpetually focused on something beyond the horizon, something only she could see. She lived in the smallest barracks room, tucked away in the farthest corner of the compound. No television flickered in her window at night. No phone calls home interrupted her evenings. The only personal item visible was an old wooden box beside her narrow bed, the sole possession she'd brought on day one. The other soldiers had noticed, of course. In a place where gossip traveled faster than bullets, Sarah Mills had become a favorite topic of speculation. Weirdo, they called her behind her back and sometimes to her face. Ghost lady when they were feeling creative. The mute when they weren't. The names didn't seem to touch her any more than rain touched a stone. She absorbed them all and continued her routine with mechanical precision. Every morning at 4:30, while the base still slumbered under a blanket of pre-dawn darkness, Sarah was already moving. Her feet hit the ground running, literally. 10 miles around the perimeter, past the motor pools and training grounds, out to where the base met the edge of the Mojave Desert. The guards at the checkpoint had grown so accustomed to her shadow passing by that they'd stopped bothering to check her ID. After her run came the range. 500 rounds every single day, far exceeding even the standards set for designated marksmen. The range masters had initially been impressed by her dedication. That admiration quickly turned to confusion, then mockery. Despite firing more rounds than anyone else on base, Sarah Mills had never once hit the bullseye, not once in 3 weeks. "Look at Mills," Private Jackson's voice carried across the range one afternoon. "All that practice and still can't hit center. What a waste of ammunition." The laughter that followed had become as routine as her morning runs. They couldn't see what Lieutenant Coleman saw when he reviewed the targets. Every single shot clustered perfectly in the 9 ring, forming a 5-pointed star pattern so precise it could have been drawn with a compass. Coleman had stood there in the range office, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. He knew that pattern. Everyone who'd served in certain circles knew that pattern. But that was impossible. Those people were ghosts, legends, dead. He'd shaken his head and filed the target away, convincing himself he was seeing things that weren't there. Stress did strange things to a person's mind. 7 years ago, snow had fallen like a funeral shroud across the Hindu Kush mountains of Afghanistan. The wind howled between the peaks, carrying with it the promise of death. Hidden beneath carefully crafted hide sites, the 6 members of Phantom Eye, the most elite sniper unit in the United States military, waited with inhuman patience. Their mission briefing had been simple in its complexity: eliminate Hakeem al-Rashid, a terrorist commander with $50 million on his head and the blood of hundreds on his hands. Captain Sarah Hawkeye Mills lay perfectly still, despite the snow that had already covered most of her body. Through her scope, she watched the compound, 2,800 meters away. The wind gauge read 15 degrees northwest. Temperature -12 Celsius. Humidity 37%. Every environmental factor calculated, every variable accounted for. "Clear shot, Cap," Marcus's voice whispered through her earpiece, her spotter and closest friend for 6 years. He knew her rhythms better than she knew them herself. Winds dying down, perfect window in 30 seconds. Sarah's breathing slowed, her heart rate dropped. 58 beats per minute, 57, 56. The world narrowed to the crosshairs, and the figure stepping onto the balcony. Al-Rashid, confident in his mountain fortress, never knowing death, watched from nearly 2 miles away. Her finger found the trigger. The smooth metal felt like an extension of her will. One shot, one life, the Phantom Eye motto whispered through her mind. But as her finger began its practiced squeeze, the world exploded behind her. The distinctive thump of grenade launchers filled the air. The whistle of incoming rounds. Screams in Pashto echoing off the mountains. "It's a trap," Marcus's voice cracked through the radio. "We've been sold out. They knew exactly where—" His words cut off in a wet gurgle. Sarah rolled from her position just as bullets stitched through the space she'd occupied. In the chaos, she saw the impossible. Thompson, her squad mate, her brother in arms, standing over Marcus's body with a smoking pistol. The snow around them turned crimson. "Sorry, Cap," Thompson said, his voice carrying clearly in the thin mountain air. "They offered more than Uncle Sam ever could. Nothing personal." He turned his weapon toward Williams, who was struggling to bring his rifle around. Another shot. Another friend down. "You son of a..." Chen's curse ended in gunfire. Sarah moved like liquid death. Training took over where emotion failed. Her rifle spoke in measured whispers, each shot finding its mark among the advancing enemy fighters. 73 confirmed kills in 4 hours. A record that would never be officially recorded because Phantom Eye would never officially exist after this night. But all the skill in the world couldn't save her team. When the quick reaction force finally arrived, guided by her emergency beacon, they found Sarah alone among the bodies. Her left arm hung useless, shattered by shrapnel. Her right eye was a ruin of blood and embedded metal. But she was alive, and around her lay evidence of a last stand that would become whispered legend in special operations circles. The debrief had been short, classified, buried. Phantom Eye ceased to exist with a stroke of a pen. Too sensitive. Too many questions about how the enemy had known their exact position. Too much potential embarrassment for people with stars on their shoulders. Sarah Mills died on paper that day, and Captain Sarah Hockey Mills vanished into the ether. 6 years she'd spent in a cabin in Ruby Mountains, Nevada. No phone, no internet, no contact with the outside world. Just her, the mountains, and the ghosts that visited every night. She'd learned to live with one working eye. Learned to shoot left-handed when the nerve damage made her right unreliable. Learned to exist without existing. Then the letter came. No postmark, no return address. Just her name in handwriting she'd have recognized anywhere. "We know you're alive. Join us at Fort Benning. One last mission." M. For Marcus? Impossible. She'd watched him die, felt his blood on her hands as she'd tried to stop the bleeding. But that handwriting. She'd seen it on 1,000 reports, 1,000 casual notes passed during briefings. Dead men didn't write letters, unless they'd never been dead at all. Week 3 at Fort Benning began with the desert survival exercise. The morning sun already blazed at 95 degrees when Captain Harrison addressed the assembled trainees. His voice boomed across the parade ground like artillery. "Listen up, maggots. 48 hours in the Mojave Desert. No water beyond what you carry. No food unless you find it. 10 rounds of ammunition. Anyone who makes it back gets to advance to Phase 2. Anyone who doesn't?" He smiled without humor. "Well, that's what the emergency beacons are for." Sarah stood in formation, silent as always. But something was different today. Sergeant Davis watched her with the predatory focus of a man who'd found new prey. When equipment was distributed, he made his move. "Mills," he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Special rules for special cases. You only get 5 rounds. Figured at your age, you won't need many bullets to quit." The laughter rippled through the ranks like a disease. Sarah took the reduced ammunition without comment. Her face remained neutral, but Coleman, watching from the command post, saw her fingers trace that strange pattern on her rifle stock. The same pattern from the range targets. They were inserted into the desert by truck. Each trainee dropped at different coordinates. The moment Sarah's boots hit sand, she began moving toward a rocky outcropping that promised shade. But Davis and his group had anticipated her route. They emerged from behind a sand dune like hyenas circling wounded prey. "Oh no, Mills, this spot's taken." Davis sprawled against the rocks with theatrical comfort. "Plenty of desert out there for you to die in." "There's 50 square miles of training area," Sarah spoke for the first time in 3 weeks. Her voice came out rough from disuse. "Enough room for everyone." "She speaks." Davis jumped to his feet, his 3 companions flanking him. "The mute bitch actually knows words." He moved closer, close enough that she could smell the tobacco on his breath. "You know what I hate most, Mills? Women who think they're soldiers. You're old enough to be my mother and you're out here playing army." One of his buddies kicked her pack, sending her water bottles rolling into the sand. The precious liquid disappeared instantly into the thirsty earth. "Oops," the soldier laughed. "Clumsy me." Sarah knelt to salvage what she could. Davis's boot caught her in the ribs, sending her sprawling. The group closed in, their shadows falling across her like birds of prey. "Stay down," Davis ordered. "That's where you belong, in the dirt with the other fossils." Sarah rose slowly, sand cascading from her uniform. Without a word, she turned and walked away. Behind her, Davis drew his sidearm. Did I say you could leave? The distinctive click of a hammer being cocked echoed in the desert silence. Turn around. Slowly. 12 hours passed. The sun tracked across the cloudless sky like a malevolent eye. Sarah had found water, a skill learned during her years of isolation, but every time she stopped to rest, Davis's group materialized. They destroyed every shelter she attempted to build, kicked sand into her filtered water, fired shots into the air to attract coyotes and other predators. "Give up, you old bitch," Jackson screamed as they contaminated her third water source. "Hit the beacon. Go home and bake cookies." "No husband would want her," Ramirez added with a cruel laugh. "Look at her, dried up like the desert." Night fell like a hammer. The temperature plummeted to 45 degrees. Sarah shivered in her sweat-soaked uniform. Davis's group had taken her jacket hours ago, claiming it as a tactical acquisition. "Old Mills?" Davis approached her meager camp, his voice dripping false concern. "I could warm you up, got plenty of body heat to share." He reached for her arm. Sarah pulled back sharply. "Don't touch me." The words came out like ice crystals. "Don't? Did you just give me an order?" Davis's face darkened. "You don't command anyone here. You're nothing. Less than nothing." He grabbed her wrist. Sarah twisted, using his momentum against him. Davis hit the ground hard, rage replacing surprise on his face. "You're going to regret that." The beating was methodical. 4 against 1. Sarah fought back, but with curious restraint. Those watching from hidden observation posts later reported that she seemed to be holding back, letting them win. By dawn of the second day, Sarah lay in the sand, lips cracked and bleeding, face swollen beyond recognition. 12 hours remained. Davis stood over her, his shadow long in the morning light. "Crawl, Mills. Crawl like the dog you are." Blood dripped from the gash above her eye, mixing with the sand. Sarah looked up at him, then slowly, deliberately, began to crawl. "That's it," the group erupted in laughter. "Good girl, now bark for us, woof woof." But their entertainment was cut short by the wail of emergency sirens. "Emergency recall, all personnel return to base. Code red, this is not a drill." The helicopters that retrieved them flew with desperate urgency. In the cramped cabin, Sarah huddled in the corner while medics tended her wounds. No one paid attention to the failure, the woman who'd crawled in the dirt. Harrison's voice crackled over the intercom, explaining the situation in terse military speak. "Militia group, 500 strong. They've taken Searchlight. Town 30 miles west, 200 hostages, mostly women and children. We're the closest response force." The helicopter banked sharply. Every available soldier deploys in 30 minutes. Back at Fort Benning, controlled chaos reigned. Weapons were distributed, ammunition counted, quick briefings delivered. Sarah sat in the medical tent, a nurse dabbing antiseptic on her split lip. Her hands shook. Add hydration, exhaustion, humiliation. Everything they said about her was true. She was old, weak, finished. "Mills," Harrison paused at her cot. "You're staying here. Your condition makes you a liability in the field." Sarah nodded wordlessly. She watched him leave, then looked down at her trembling hands, hands that had once been steady enough to put a bullet through a playing card at 1,000 meters. Now, they couldn't even hold a cup of water without spilling. She stumbled back to her barracks, each step an effort. The wooden box sat where she'd left it, untouched for 3 weeks. With fumbling fingers, she opened it for the first time since arriving at Fort Benning. Inside lay her past. A faded photograph showed 6 soldiers grinning beneath an American flag. Phantom Eye in happier days. Marcus with his crooked smile. Williams and his terrible jokes. Chen always trying to look serious and failing. And her, younger, undamaged, believing in things like loyalty and honor. Beneath the photo, a challenge coin gleamed dully. The inscription read, "One shot, one life, one promise." The unofficial motto they'd added to the official one. A promise to always have each other's backs. At the bottom of the box, an envelope waited. Her name was written across it in familiar handwriting, unopened, saved for when she truly needed it. With shaking hands, she tore it open. "Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I succeeded in faking my death. Yes, I'm alive. Thompson was just the tip of the iceberg. Someone high up wanted Phantom Eye gone, and they're not finished. Fort Benning is a trap, but I knew you'd come anyway. You never could resist a mystery. They're going to hit Searchlight. It's not really a militia. It's connected to our past. Only Hawkeye can stop what's coming. Trust me one more time. Look for the star pattern. You'll know what to do. B.S. Davis isn't who he seems. Watch him." Sarah's hands stopped shaking. She read the letter again, pieces clicking into place. The deliberate humiliation, the too convenient militia attack, the familiar pattern of betrayal. Someone was using Fort Benning as bait, and she'd walked right into it. But now she knew. She stood, steady for the first time in days. From the bottom of the box, she pulled out something wrapped in oilcloth. Her fingers remembered the shape before her eye recognized it. A custom Kestrel weather meter, a rangefinder that had seen 7 years of hard use. And beneath it all, folded with military precision, black tactical gear bearing no insignia. Sarah Mills vanished into the barracks bathroom. What emerged 10 minutes later was something else entirely. The deployment staging area buzzed with activity when a figure in black walked through the doors. Conversations died mid-sentence. Sarah Mills stood there, but not the Sarah Mills they knew. This woman moved with predatory grace, a Barrett M82 anti-material rifle balanced on her shoulder like it weighed nothing. The kind of rifle that wasn't stored in regular armories. Mills? Harrison's voice cracked. How did you? Fort Benning Armory, Locker 7, biometric lock. Sarah's voice carried command authority that made lieutenants snap to attention. Only accessible with level 9 clearance or higher. That's impossible. Level 9 is reserved for Special Operations Command, Tier 1 operators. Sarah began attaching a specialized scope with practiced efficiency. I need a spotter and exact coordinates of the hostage location. Davis laughed, but it sounded forced. Still playing pretend, old lady? The movement was so fast most missed it. Sarah drew her sidearm and fired. The bullet passed through Davis's patrol cap, close enough to singe hair. A perfect line of blood appeared where it grazed his scalp. Next time I aim 2 inches lower, she said conversationally. Anyone else have comments about my age? The silence was absolute. Even the ammunition being loaded seemed to pause its metallic song. Coleman's face had gone pale. Hawkeye? Captain Sarah Hawkeye. Former, Sarah corrected, checking her rifle's action. Now, those coordinates. We have 200 civilians who need extraction. The ride to Searchlight took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Sarah sat apart from the others, her presence creating a bubble of empty space, even in the crowded transport. The other soldiers stole glances at her, trying to reconcile the woman they'd mocked with the legend Coleman had whispered about. 2,341 confirmed kills. The longest recorded shot in Marine Corps history, 3 silver stars. A Medal of Honor so classified it didn't officially exist. Searchlight appeared below them, a small town turned into a battlefield. The militia had taken the elementary school, its pink stucco walls now bristling with rifle barrels. 2 bodies lay in the playground. A warning to anyone thinking of approaching. Intel says 17 shooters visible, the operations officer reported. Unknown number inside. They've threatened to execute 1 hostage every 10 minutes if their demands aren't met. What demands? Someone asked. They want her, the officer pointed at Sarah, by name. They want Captain Sarah Mills. Sarah smiled grimly. Of course they do. She found her position on the town's water tower, 1,847 meters from the school. The spotter assigned to her, a young corporal named Martinez, sat up beside her with visible nervousness. Ma'am, this is the wind gusting at 35 knots, the distance. Nobody can make this shot. Sarah didn't respond. She was already elsewhere, her mind calculating angles, wind drift, bullet drop, Coriolis effect. Her breathing slowed. The world narrowed to the scope's view. Target acquired, she reported calmly. Leader visible. 3rd floor window, northeast corner. Wait. Her finger found the trigger. He's got a child. Pistol to her head. Negative. Negative. Harrison's voice exploded through the radio. Wait for the assault team to get in position. Too risky. No time. He's counting down on his fingers. Sarah exhaled slowly. 3, 2. The rifle spoke with thunder's authority. 1.3 seconds later, the militia leader's head snapped back. The child screamed but lived. What the? Confusion erupted among the militants. They'd expected negotiation, not precision death from impossible range. Sarah worked the bolt, 16 remaining. The next minute and 37 seconds entered military legend. 16 shots, 16 targets, each one a perfect kill, threaded between hostages, through windows, around corners that should have been impossible to see. Sarah had become the weapon, and the weapon had become death itself. Assault team, you're clear, she announced as the last body fell. No visible threats remaining. The raid was textbook. The hostages emerged crying, traumatized but alive, every single one. As the helicopters loaded the rescued civilians, Sarah remained on her perch, watching through the scope. There, Movement in the command vehicle the militia had abandoned. She recognized the figure trying to slip away. "Harrison," she called, "detain Sergeant Davis, now." "What? Mills, he's one of ours." "He's Thompson's contact. Check his left shoulder. He'll have a scar from Hindu Kush. Triangle shape from shrapnel." Her voice carried absolute certainty. "He's been feeding them information. Probably has been since before I arrived." The arrest was swift. Davis tried to run, confirming guilt better than any confession. When they stripped his shirt, the scar was exactly where Sarah had said it would be. Back at Fort Benning, the base had assembled. Word traveled faster than wildfire in the military. The woman they'd humiliated, beaten, mocked. She'd just pulled off the impossible. General Andrews himself appeared on the main screen via satellite link from the Pentagon. "Captain Sarah Mills," his voice boomed across the parade ground. "Or should I say, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mills." Harrison stood at attention, confusion written on his face. "Sir?" "Field promotion. Effective immediately." Andrews turned his attention to the screen. For those wondering why one of America's most decorated warriors was crawling in the dirt yesterday, the answer is simple. We had a mole. Multiple moles. Colonel Mills volunteered to draw them out. Sarah stood at attention, her face revealing nothing. "Let me be clear," Andrews continued. "Lieutenant Colonel Mills is the finest sniper in United States military history. 2,341 confirmed kills. The longest successful shot on record at 2,847 meters. Medal of Honor recipient, 3 Silver Stars, and as of today, commander of the reconstituted Phantom I unit." "Sir," someone called out. "Why the deception? Why let us?" "Because Thompson had allies. We needed to know who would reveal themselves when they thought they had easy prey." Andrews smiled coldly. 13 arrests have been made in the last hour. A network 7 years in the making. Destroyed because they couldn't resist kicking someone when they were down. The assembly was dismissed, but nobody moved quickly. They milled about, unsure how to process what they'd witnessed. Davis's group, minus Davis himself, approached Sarah with the awkward shuffle of the deeply shamed. "Ma'am," Jackson started, his voice cracking. God, we're sorry. We didn't know." "Stand up straight," Sarah said quietly. They snapped to attention, surprised. "You don't apologize for not knowing classified information," she continued, her voice carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. "But you do owe yourselves an apology. You saw someone different, someone who didn't fit your idea of a soldier, and you attacked. That's not strength, that's fear." She turned to leave, then paused. "You want to know the difference between a good soldier and a great one? A good soldier wins battles. A great soldier wins them with honor intact." As the sun set over Fort Benning, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, Sarah Mills stood alone on the roof of the command building. The desert wind carried the sounds of a base returning to normal. Orders being shouted, engines starting, life continuing. Martinez, the young corporal who'd spotted for her, found her there. "Ma'am? The general wants to know if you'll take the position, leading the new Phantom I unit." Sarah didn't turn around. "Tell him. I'll think about it." "Ma'am, can I ask something?" "Go ahead. You could have revealed yourself any time, stopped the humiliation, why didn't you?" Sarah finally turned, and Martinez saw something in her eye that made him step back. Not anger, not pride, something deeper and sadder. Because sometimes, Corporal, the hardest battles aren't against enemies, they're against our own assumptions. Every person who kicked me when I was down revealed who they really were. That intelligence is worth more than pride. She walked past him toward the stairs, then stopped. "Oh, and Martinez? Good spotting today. You've got potential." As she disappeared into the building's shadows, Martinez stood alone with the sunset. Somewhere in the distance, a rifle cracked on the range. Someone practicing, trying to be better. The sound carried on the wind like a promise. The mess hall buzzed with conversation that night. Stories grew with each telling. The impossible shots became more impossible. The revelation became more dramatic. But, in a quiet corner, Coleman sat with the target sheets he'd saved, tracing the star pattern with his finger. "She knew," he muttered to himself. "She knew we were watching and did it anyway. Let us see just enough to doubt, not enough to be sure." The young soldiers around him leaned in, eager for wisdom. "What does it mean, sir?" Coleman smiled sadly. "It means the best warriors are the ones you never see coming, the ones who don't need to announce their strength." He folded the target carefully. "Remember that next time you meet someone who doesn't fit your expectations." Miles away, in a nondescript motel room, Sarah Mills sat on the edge of a bed, holding a phone that had just rung for the first time in 7 years. "Hello, Marcus," she said, without checking the caller ID. Knew you'd figure it out. The voice was older, rougher, but unmistakably alive. Davis sang like a bird. We got names, dates, the whole network. And Thompson? In custody, he thought you were dead, got careless. Sarah closed her eye, allowing herself a moment of something that might have been satisfaction. So, it's over. This part is... Marcus paused. Sarah, I'm sorry for everything, for letting you think... You did what you had to do. She cut him off gently. We all did. The general's offer is real. Phantomine needs you. Sarah looked at the wooden box open beside her, at the photos of young soldiers who'd believed in things like honor and duty. Most of them were gone now, but their ideals didn't have to be. I'll think about it, she repeated. After hanging up, she walked to the window and looked out at the night. Somewhere out there, in places most people would never know about, rough men and women stood ready to do violence on behalf of those who slept peacefully. It was a hard life, a lonely life, but it was necessary. Her reflection stared back from the glass. Older, scarred, but unbroken. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new chances to prove that strength wasn't about being the loudest or the cruelest. Some battles are won not with bullets, but with dignity. The thought made her almost smile. She'd learned that lesson in the mud of Fort Benning, taught it in the scope of a rifle, and lived it in the silence of her suffering. Now others knew it too. As she prepared for bed, one last thought crossed her mind. Somewhere tonight, young soldiers were questioning their assumptions, examining their prejudices, learning to see beyond surfaces, not because she'd lectured them, but because she'd shown them. If you were her, would you have forgiven? Would you have found the strength to endure humiliation for a greater purpose? Or would pride have won? The questions hung in the air like morning mist over the desert, waiting for each person to answer in the solitude of their own conscience. Sarah Mills turned off the light and lay down to sleep. Tomorrow she would decide about Phantom Eye. Tomorrow she would choose whether to step back into the shadows or remain in the light. But tonight she had won the only victory that truly mattered. She had kept her honor intact. And in the end, that was everything. Rotary Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Research Beta Opus 4.